we are glad that Rick is sticking around with us, and we're joined via telephone from David Brody, CBN chief political correspondent and anchor of the Brody File. David, you are in California. You're in Murrieta, where you had that public uprising against the buses being brought into the town. What are you seeing on the ground there, and what has been the response of people you've met to what Joe Biden had to say about, quote, "These are our children"?
Right, it's interesting. We just came here into Murrieta last night. We were at the border in Yuma, Arizona, where we were there for a few days. But I got to tell you, here in Murrieta, we're doing a story looking really at the intersection of the immigration issue and the church issue. There's been this whole debate about compassion, and where does compassion end, if you will, as it relates to illegal immigration. And so when we hit the ground here in Murrieta, we actually talked to a couple of folks. As a matter of fact, Father Cameron Lemons at one of the churches here in Murrieta, who was right in the middle of all of this when the protest happened. He took a few of these illegal aliens in and gave them shelter, gave them food, and of course he's saying this is a bit biblical, as that Jesus commands him to do this. And indeed, there wouldn't be a Christian, a biblical Christian, if you will, in the country that would disagree with that. I think that the lines, though, have been drawn about if they're lawbreakers, what exactly happens at that point. And so, there's basically a ground zero atmosphere here in Murrieta as it relates to, you've got totally different viewpoints on this issue, and it really has split the town. And the Father Cameron that we talked to last night was really disheartened to hear about that and to see this transpire, because he says, look, Murrieta is a nice, wonderful town, and it brought out the vitriol in folks, and it was unfortunate, but it has split the town and given the town a black eye, no doubt.
Well, you take a look at this, and certainly, indeed, some of the most adamant border hawks who have gone to patrol the border themselves. I think of the Minutemen a few years ago, when they would find illegals in distress, they would give them food and water and get them to the hospital. They would deal with them compassionately, but the disposition of having those people who come here illegally stay here, that's another question entirely. And so to Rick in New York, my question to you is, we have American children here in need legally. Shouldn't they be our top priority?
Well, I would say yes to that, but I have to tell you, I genuinely appreciate the analysis David just gave. I really do. I have to say, I was on a radio program last night where this was the topic, and I was listening to callers come up with biblical reasons why they shouldn't be allowed here, biblical reasons why they should, this and that. David just did a really good job of summing up the issue here when it comes to a religious responsibility versus a legal responsibility. Yes, we should always be looking after our own kids first, but that doesn't mean, I think it's a bit of a false argument, because there is room to look after our kids, which we don't do well enough. It's a problem that I have with the pro-lifers. They are great advocates for children before they're born and then somehow lose interest after they arrive. There is room for us to do both, to do what we should be doing for our own kids and have that, I think David would describe it as a Christian approach towards kids in the situation we're finding on the southern border. I really hope people were watching what he had to say. I thought it was great.
Well, Rick, even as you extol the virtues in David's analysis on the ground in Murrieta, you offer a somewhat flippant shot at those who are pro-life, suggesting that they don't. I want to get David's response.
It's not flippant at all.
Of course it's flippant.
It's not flippant whatsoever.
Of course it is.
No, it's
David,
not.
your take on the life issue and the alleged lack of compassion for children once they're here that Rick just told us about.
Well, I think, let me say a couple things. I think there's a narrow view and a broader view, and I think Rick has hit on a couple interesting points here, which is, hey, look, when it comes to the pro-life lobby, if you will, or let's go even broader than that, when it comes to the pro-life folks in this country, they are focused very much on the fetus, on the unborn, and well, they should, in their view, because of it being, in essence, what they believe is murder, is killing an unborn child. And so this sucks up all the oxygen in the room, so to speak. And so that makes sense why they're so focused on that. Having said that, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not focused on what happens after the child is born. But remember that let's be honest. I mean, they're not that they're raising money on the issue, but they're raising money on the issue, and so therefore, I mean, they're going to have their focus on this because that's their focus. I mean, there are other organizations that focus on other pro-life ventures and legislation, but that's not their necessary focus.
Let's turn to. Go ahead, Rick. Last word on this one.
Here's where I'll disagree. And JD, I got to take some issue with your saying it's flippant, because it wasn't. It was truly meant. Look, I have a lot of sympathy for people who are pro-life. I really do. If you're somebody who staunchly believes that that is a living individual, I completely get why they take this so seriously. And while I may not agree in every instance, I have nothing but respect for those who do take that position. But I do believe that when you talk to people who have a strong feeling about the importance of protecting life in the womb, they do lose interest. I think David's talking about more of the organized movement. I take his point. But I'm talking to your average person who feels the strong need to protect the unborn. Fine, I get it. And then loses interest and takes a very dim view of what we want to do for people once they've arrived. That's what I'm referring to. And by the way, you know, you'll find a lot of people who are pro-life are also pro-death penalty, and I've always found that to be completely astounding.
Well, there's a key distinction.
Logically.
There's a key distinction.
What?
The unborn, innocent life, those who have taken the life of another, that's another kettle of fish entirely. But we'll have that debate on another day.
Life is life.
Let me move to another topic, the political life in the United States and the life and legacy of Barack Obama. What is transpiring in the world that for some seems to be frayed at the edges and coming apart. Former UN Ambassador John Bolton weighing in on our president's leadership. Let's listen to what Ambassador Bolton had to say, and I'll both give you a chance to react to his observations.
The world's descending into chaos, and if the United States pulls back, you're going to have anarchy increasing.
So that's the take from Ambassador Bolton. First to you, David Brody. Do you agree with his assessment?
Well, you know, we throw around these words anarchy, and of course at that point it leaves very little room for discussion because people get so up in arms about certain words like that. You know, I think his anarchy word, in essence, reveals a much larger issue here with this president, which is, of course, it goes right to executive orders and constitutional overreach and all of that. There's John Boehner lawsuit, and we go on from there. And so, look, I think that very well could be the negative legacy of this president, at least from a conservative standpoint. You know, liberals might argue differently, though. You may get a lot of liberals to start arguing the exact same thing that conservatives are saying now about constitutional overreach. I think this is the danger, and I think we're going to see, obviously, this come to an even more of a head, if you will, here in the next week or two, when the president, of course, issues some sort of executive order on immigration. And, you know, it's unfortunate because, you know, Obamacare in this country, once again, was done by 51 votes. And so when you have no Republicans, in essence, signing on to a signature legislative achievement, that's a problem. When you're doing big things on immigration through executive order, that's a problem. And so, what do I mean by a problem? I'm not talking from a policy standpoint. I'm talking from a bring the country together standpoint. And when you're starting to look, the country's already fractured over immigration. To kind of add fire, even more fire to the situation, it seems to be very problematic, very troublesome.
Got about a minute left. Rick Ungar, you get the last word on what we're talking about here.
Well, look, JD, I think you'd agree that I tend to be pretty open-minded towards other points of view, certainly conservative points of view. But when it comes to John Bolton is in the business of John Bolton. I find him completely not credible on almost everything he says for a very simple reason. Look, I agree with what the president does sometimes. I disagree, and when I disagree, I go on record writing about it. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. But yet, to listen to John Bolton, this president has never done anything right, even by accident. That disqualifies him from my perspective.
Well, the only thing disqualifying us from continuing this invigorating discussion is that four-letter word That spells out T-I-M-E, time. Gentlemen, thanks to you both on the East and West Coast, Rick Ungar and David Brody. We look forward to our next discussion. Now, how do you feel about these issues we talked about? Why don't you tweet us your reaction at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum.